Subscribe and hit that like button to join our community. You're about to hear a story of a long-lost secret that will shatter a man's world. 15 years ago, a billionaire left his one true love for ambition. Now, he's back, and the woman he abandoned is not alone. Beside her stands a teenage girl with a smile that eerily mirrors his own. What would you do if you discovered you had a child you never knew existed? Leave a comment below with your thoughts. The air in the grand ballroom of the Imperial Hotel was thick with the scent of money and champagne. For CEO Adrian Black, it was just another business gala, another night of shaking hands and talking numbers. But all of that changed the moment he saw her. Across the room, a woman in a scarlet dress moved with a grace he'd never forgotten. It had been 15 years, but Adrian would know Daniela Sanchez. She was his first love, the woman he'd left behind to chase his dreams. His glass of champagne trembled. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Adrian," his business partner Marcus said with a wry smile. "Wait, do you know Chef Sanchez?" Adrian barely heard him. He was captivated by Daniela, who was now a confident, successful woman, a far cry from the shy waitress he'd known. Her long hair was gone, replaced by a chic, shoulder-length cut. She was radiant, powerful, and utterly out of his league. Then, a teenager walked up to her, dressed in a sophisticated navy blue gown. The girl leaned in and smiled. Adrian's world stopped. That smile, the same dimple on his own right cheek, the same subtle curve of the lips. It couldn't be a coincidence. His heart hammered in his chest, a drumbeat of a truth his mind couldn't yet accept. "What is it?" Marcus pressed, sensing his friend's turmoil. "I need to talk to her," Adrian said, handing him the glass. Now, he moved through the crowd with a single-minded purpose, ignoring the CEOs and celebrities, trying to catch his eye. As the head of Black real estate and one of the wealthiest men in the country, he was used to being the center of attention. But tonight, all that mattered was the woman he was walking toward. Daniela saw him and froze. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. For a moment, the music and chatter faded away. It was just the two of them, connected by a shared past, and a secret Adrian was just starting to uncover. She whispered something to the girl, who nodded and walked toward the drink station. Seizing the moment, Adrian finally reached her. "Daniela," he said, his voice raspy. "Adrian," she replied, her tone controlled, but with a barely perceptible tremor. "I didn't expect to see you here. It's been a long time. 15 years to be exact," she said, and the precision in her voice suggested she'd counted every one. An awkward silence fell between them. Adrian had 1,000 questions, but one dominated his thoughts. "The young woman who was with you," he began, struggling to form the question that could change his life forever. Daniela met his gaze, a flash of vulnerability crossing her carefully maintained composure. "She's my daughter," she said softly. "Her name is Valeria." The name hit Adrian like a physical blow, a name he'd never heard, but one that should have meant everything to him. "How old is she?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "She'll be 15 in 3 months, Daniela whispered. Adrian did a quick mental calculation. The last time he'd seen Daniela was weeks before he left for Spain to supervise his first international project, the very opportunity that had skyrocketed his career. They had ended their relationship after a heated argument about their future. He'd wanted her to come with him. She had refused to give up her culinary studies. "She's my daughter, isn't she?" he asked, his heart pounding. Daniela's expression hardened. "You're as direct as ever, and you're still avoiding the hard questions," he countered. "Is she my daughter?" Daniela glanced briefly at Valeria, who was chatting with a waiter, before turning back to face him. "Yes, Adrian, she is your daughter." The words hit him like a punch. Despite his suspicions, the confirmation left him breathless. He had to make a conscious effort to maintain his composure, aware of the curious glances they were attracting. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, a mix of pain and anger in his voice. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you left," Daniela said, taking a deep breath. "I tried to contact you. I never got any calls. Any messages?" He protested. "I called your new number in Spain 3 times, she explained, her voice calm but firm. "The first time, a woman answered. The second time, that same woman told me not to bother you again. The third time, you answered. You were celebrating something. There was loud music and laughter. You asked who it was, and when I started to talk, you said you had more important things to do and you hung up." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, a faint memory forming in his mind. The launch party for his first international project. He had been euphoric, a little drunk, surrounded by new colleagues and new possibilities. "After that," Daniela continued, "I decided we didn't need you. We could make it on our own." "You had no right to make that decision for me," he said, his voice rising. She is my daughter, too." "And what would you have done, Adrian?" she shot back. "Would you have abandoned your big opportunity? Or perhaps sent a monthly check to soothe your conscience while you built your empire across the ocean?" The accusation hurt because it held a kernel of truth. Back then, his ambition had consumed everything. He wasn't sure what he would have done. "We'll never know, because you never gave me the chance to decide," he retorted. 15 years, Daniela. You stole 15 years from me and my daughter." "I didn't steal anything," she replied, a sudden hardness in her eyes. "You chose your path. I chose mine. And Valeria has grown up happy and healthy, which is all that matters." Adrian was about to respond when he noticed Valeria walking back toward them, holding 2 glasses of juice. She stopped short, seeing the tension between them. "Mom?" she asked cautiously, her hazel eyes, the same shade as Adrian's, darting between the 2 adults. Seeing her up close, the resemblance was even more striking. It wasn't just the smile or the eyes. Valeria had his same slight frown when she was confused, the same determined chin. It was like looking at a young, feminine version of himself, blended with Daniela's natural elegance. "Valeria, this is Adrian Black," Daniela said, with a calmness that must have taken superhuman effort to maintain. "He's an old friend. It's a pleasure to meet you," the young woman said politely, extending her free hand. Adrian shook it, feeling a jolt of electricity at the first touch with his daughter. His daughter! The words echoed in his mind. "The pleasure is all mine," he managed to say, surprised his voice sounded so normal. "Your mother and I have known each other for many years." "From culinary school?" Valeria asked with interest. "Not exactly," Daniela interjected. "We met when I was a waitress, before school." Valeria nodded, her intelligent eyes studying Adrian, with an intensity that suggested she sensed there was more to the story. "Mom is the best chef in New York now," she said with obvious pride. "She just won the Breakout Restaurant of the Year award with Roots." "Don't exaggerate, honey," Daniela smiled, though a blush on her cheeks betrayed her satisfaction. "We're just getting started." "Roots?" Adrian asked, genuinely intrigued. "I haven't heard of it." "Because it's only 6 months old," Valeria explained enthusiastically. "But there's already a 3-week wait for a table. Mom takes traditional American recipes and reinterprets them with modern techniques. It's incredible. You should try her contemporary mac and cheese. What she does with those flavors is insane." Adrian saw the pride in the young woman's eyes and felt a pang of envy toward Daniela. She had been there for every moment of Valeria's life. She had built that relationship, that camaraderie. He was a complete stranger. "That sounds fascinating," he said sincerely. "I'd love to visit sometime." "Perhaps," Daniela said diplomatically. "Now, if you'll excuse us," Valeria and I need to greet some colleagues." It was a polite but firm dismissal. Adrian nodded, knowing he couldn't force the situation in this time and place. "Of course, it was, revealing to see you again, Daniela," he said, then looked at Valeria. "And a true pleasure to meet you, Valeria." The young woman smiled, that smile that was a mirror of his own, and Adrian felt something break and mend inside him simultaneously. "Likewise, Mr. Black," she replied. As he watched them walk away, a steely determination formed within him. He was not going to disappear from his daughter's life now that he knew she existed. Somehow, he would find a way to make up for lost time, to earn a place in her life. And maybe, just maybe, there would also be a chance for reconciliation with the only woman he had never been able to completely forget. Comment below. Do you think Daniela was right to keep Valeria a secret from Adrian? Marcus approached him, following his gaze. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Adrian replied, his eyes still on Daniela and Valeria. "My past, and possibly my future." "What are you talking about?" "I'll explain later," he said, making a decision. "Right now, I need to make some calls. Find out everything you can about the restaurant Roots and its executive chef, Daniela Sanchez." "You know her?" Marcus asked. Confused, Adrian finally tore his gaze away from the two retreating figures and faced his friend with an expression that mixed determination and vulnerability, a combination Marcus had never seen in him. "That woman was the love of my life 15 years ago, he said in a controlled voice. "And that teenager with her, she's my daughter." The shock on Marcus's face was exactly what Adrian had felt minutes earlier. But while his friend searched for words, Adrian was already planning his next move. Because if there was one thing he'd learned on his rise to success, it was that every problem had a solution. And reclaiming his family, the family he never knew he had just become his only priority. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. From across the ballroom, Daniela glanced back at him. Their eyes met briefly, and in that instant, Adrian knew she was also aware that this reunion would change everything. The question was, for better or for worse? Adrian didn't remember how he'd gotten to his penthouse in the exclusive neighborhood of Manhattan. The lights of the city twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but he barely noticed them. Sitting on his Italian leather sofa, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, he replayed every second of his encounter with Daniela and Valeria, his daughter. He had a 15-year-old daughter, a teenager who had grown up without knowing him, without even knowing of his existence. The mix of emotions was overwhelming: astonishment, rage, guilt, and a strange sense of loss for all the moments he'd never lived. Her first day of school, her birthdays, her triumphs and failures. He had missed it all. The private elevator chime pulled him from his thoughts. Marcus entered the apartment without waiting for an invitation, a habit forged by years of friendship. "You okay? You left the gala without saying goodbye to anyone," he said, dropping his jacket onto a chair. "The Rivers were waiting to talk to you about the Santa Monica project." "To hell with the Rivers and Santa Monica," Adrian replied, finally setting his glass on the coffee table. "Did you get what I asked for?" Marcus sighed and pulled out his tablet. Daniela Sanchez, 38 years old, executive chef and owner of the restaurant Roots, which opened 6 months ago in the West Village, he began, scrolling through the screen. She studied at the Culinary Institute of America, graduated with honors, worked at several renowned restaurants, including 3 years at Blue Hill at Stone Barns. She returned to New York 7 years ago and was sous chef at 11 Madison Park before opening her own place. "And Valeria?" Adrian asked. "No, sir," leaning forward. "Valeria Sanchez, 14 years old, student at the Lycée Français de New York, junior debate champion, member of the swimming team, outstanding academic average," Marcus continued. "There's no public record of her father, On her birth certificate, he's listed as unknown. Those two words were like a stab to the heart. Father unknown. A legal lie that erased his existence from his daughter's life. How could she do this to me? He murmured, more to himself than to Marcus. From what you told me, she tried to contact you, his friend replied, sitting down across from him. 3 times. 3 damn calls, Marcus, Adrian exclaimed, jumping to his feet. Who gives up after 3 calls when it's something this important? Someone who was rejected 3 times, Marcus said calmly. Someone who heard another woman answer your phone, who heard you say you had more important things to do. Put yourself in her shoes for a moment. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated because he knew his friend was right. A heavy silence settled between them as they both contemplated the gravity of the situation. What are you going to do? Marcus finally asked. Make up for lost time, Adrian said with determination. Get to know my daughter. Be a part of her life. And Daniela? The question hung in the air. What did he really feel for Daniela after all these years? He had loved her intensely once, with the overwhelming passion of youth. Then he had left her behind, convinced that his ambition and career were more important. Now, seeing her transformed into a confident, successful woman, he had felt something stir inside him, a connection he thought he had forgotten. It's complicated, he finally admitted. First, I need to build a relationship with Valeria. Daniela, we'll see. Marcus looked at him with skepticism. It won't be easy. You've built your life as a lone wolf, Adrian. Your real estate empire, your investments, your flings. You're not exactly a model of family stability. People change, Adrian replied, though even he wasn't sure how much he was willing to change. By the way, Marcus added, consulting his tablet again, I got you this. A reservation at Roots for tomorrow night. It was a nightmare to get. I had to call in several favors and practically threaten the maitre d', but I did it. Adrian took the digital confirmation Marcus handed him, feeling a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Thanks, he said sincerely. I owe you one. You owe me several, Marcus corrected with a half smile, before turning serious again. Just be careful, okay? Don't mess up the life they've built just because you suddenly decided you want to be a father. His friend's words resonated in his mind long after Marcus had left. Adrian spent hours looking at photos of Daniela and Roots online, searching for any image where Valeria might appear. But the chef seemed to have kept her daughter out of the media spotlight. Close to midnight, when the whiskey finally started to take effect, Adrian found something. A brief promotional video for the restaurant where, for just 3 seconds, Valeria appeared in the background, helping to arrange flowers in a vase. He froze the image and zoomed in, studying every detail of his daughter's face, searching for traces of himself in her features. He found them in abundance. The shape of her jaw, the curve of her eyebrows, even the way she tilted her head slightly when she was focused. It all screamed black. How had no one else seen it? Or had they, and simply not dared to mention it? He ran his fingers over the screen, as if he could touch the daughter he never knew he had through it, and felt a lump in his throat. 15 years. He had lost 15 years he could never get back. The restaurant Roots occupied a beautifully restored historic building. The decor blended traditional American elements with contemporary touches, creating an atmosphere that was both warm and sophisticated. When Adrian entered, dressed in a custom navy suit, he felt all eyes on him. It was an effect he was used to. His face appeared regularly in business magazines and social events. Mr. Black, welcome to Roots. The maitre d' greeted him with excessive friendliness. Your table is ready. Right this way, please. He was led to a secluded table with an excellent view of the open kitchen, where the chefs worked in full view of the diners. Adrian scanned the space, looking for Daniela, but didn't see her. Is Chef Sanchez here tonight? He asked casually as his water was poured. Of course, sir. The chef is always present. Overseeing every detail, the maitre d' replied. Would you like to speak with her? Perhaps later, Adrian said, feigning disinterest. For now, I'll trust your recommendations. The dinner was an extraordinary experience. Each dish told a story, blending traditional American flavors with cutting-edge techniques. Adrian, who had eaten at the best restaurants in the world, was genuinely impressed. Daniela had managed to create something truly unique, a reflection of her talent and passion. He was halfway through his main course when he finally saw her emerge from the kitchen, dressed in her white chef's uniform. She moved with confidence between the tables, greeting some diners, supervising the details. When her eyes met Adrian's, he noticed her brief hesitation before she regained her composure and approached his table. "Good evening, Mr. Black," she said professionally, as if she barely knew him. "I hope you're enjoying your experience at Roots." "The food is exceptional," he replied sincerely. "You've created something extraordinary here, Daniela." A hint of pride crossed her face before she returned to her neutral expression. "Thank you. If you'll excuse me, I must get back to the kitchen." "Please wait," he stopped her. "Just 5 minutes. We need to talk." Daniela glanced around, aware of the curious eyes. "This isn't the time or the place," she replied in a low voice. "When then?" Adrian insisted. "Where?" She seemed to consider her options before answering. "Tomorrow. I have an hour free after the lunch service, at 4. "I'll be here," he promised. Daniela nodded briefly and walked back toward the kitchen. Adrian watched her go, noticing how the staff straightened as she passed, the respect evident in their gestures. She had built all of this by herself, while raising a daughter. He couldn't help but feel admiration. As he finished his dessert, a movement at the kitchen entrance caught his attention. Valeria had entered through a side door, dressed in her lycée school uniform. She walked up to Daniela, gave her a quick hug, and then started helping out, tying an apron and getting to work with the familiarity of someone who knew the place well. Adrian watched the interaction between mother and daughter, fascinated. The camaraderie between them was evident. They communicated at times with just glances or gestures. At one point, Valeria made a comment that made Daniela laugh, a laugh Adrian remembered well, and that gave him a pang of nostalgia. How could he fit into that well-established dynamic? What right did he have to disrupt the life they had built without him? But at the same time, how could he stay away now that he knew the truth? As he paid the bill, leaving an extraordinarily generous tip, he made a decision. He wouldn't seek revenge for the lost years or try to force his presence. He would have to earn his place in Valeria's life, step by step, with patience and respect. And as for Daniela, the feelings he had experienced seeing her again were too intense to ignore. Maybe fate was offering them a second chance. Or maybe it was just life collecting the price for the decisions he had made 15 years ago. Either way, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, the real challenge would begin. It was 3:55 p.m. Adrian checked his watch as he waited in the small office of the Roots restaurant. He had arrived 10 minutes early, and an assistant had led him to this space that perfectly reflected Daniela's personality, tidy yet welcoming, with traditional American elements mixed with a contemporary design. On the walls, framed photographs showed elaborate dishes, local produce, and smiling farmers. But what caught his attention were the few personal photos on a shelf. Daniela and Valeria at different stages of growth. Mother and daughter at the beach, at a graduation, cooking together. An entire life captured in images of which he had not been a part. The door opened and Daniela entered, still in her chef's uniform, but without the jacket, wearing a simple black t-shirt under her apron. She looked tired, but alert, as if she had mentally prepared for this conversation. "Thank you for giving me this time," Adrian said, standing up. "I know you're busy. Let's get straight to the point," she replied, sitting behind her desk. What exactly do you want, Adrian? The direct question took him by surprise, though he should have expected it. Daniela was never one for small talk. I want to get to know my daughter, he responded with the same frankness. I want to be part of her life. Daniela studied him in silence for a few seconds, as if evaluating his sincerity. Why now? She finally asked. Because you saw her and thought it would be nice to have a teenage daughter? Because she reminded you of your own mortality? Or simply because you can't stand the idea that there's something in this world you can't control? The words hit Adrian like a punch, but he maintained his composure. I'm not going to deny that I was surprised, he admitted. And yes, seeing a person who carries my blood, my smile, my gestures, was shocking. But this isn't about control, Daniela. This is about responsibility. Responsibility? She repeated with a bitter smile. That's a convenient word after 15 years. I didn't know she existed, he reminded her, a harder tone in his voice. You can't blame me for not taking a responsibility I didn't know about. Daniela leaned back in her chair, a glimmer of vulnerability crossing her usually controlled expression. And what if I had told you I was pregnant that last night before you left for Spain? She asked. What would you have done then? The question hung between them like a challenge. Adrian wanted to answer that he would have given up everything for her, for their child. But they both knew that was probably not true. Not the Adrian of that time, consumed by ambition and the desire to prove himself. I don't know, he finally admitted. The man I was then, I don't know. But the man I am now wants to know his daughter. A heavy silence settled between them. Daniela got up and walked to the window overlooking the restaurant's side alley, where suppliers were unloading fresh produce. It hasn't been easy, she finally said, her voice softer. Raising a girl alone, building a career, keeping a roof over our heads. There were moments, very hard moments. Adrian felt a pang of guilt, imagining a young, pregnant Daniela working while she studied, sacrificing for their daughter. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. I can't change the past, but I can be present now. I can help. Daniela turned, a spark of pride in her eyes. We don't need your money, she clarified. We've done well without it so far. I don't just mean money, Adrian replied. I mean being present as a father, getting to know her, supporting her, being part of her life. And how do you suggest we do that? Daniela asked, crossing her arms. I just show up at home one day and say, by the way, Valeria, that rich man you met at the gala is actually your biological father? The image was absurd, but it presented a real dilemma. How do you introduce an unknown father into a teenager's life without completely upending her world? We could start slowly, Adrian suggested, not revealing who I am immediately, but letting me get to know her first. Build a connection. Lie to her? Daniela questioned skeptically. Not exactly. Just approach her gradually. Maybe you could introduce me as an old friend who's come back into your life, an investor interested in the restaurant, something like that. Over time, when trust has been established, we'll tell her the truth. Daniela seemed to consider the idea, though her expression remained cautious. Valeria is smart, she warned, and she has a sixth sense for detecting lies. It won't be easy to fool her. I don't want to fool her, Adrian clarified. Just soften the impact of the truth. Give her time to get to know me before burdening her with the label of father. Daniela sat back down, her fingers drumming softly on the desk as she considered her options. What if it doesn't work? She finally asked. If you try to enter our lives and then realize that fatherhood isn't what you expected? What happens when the novelty wears off and you get tired of playing happy family? The implicit accusation was clear. Adrian was known for his inconstancy in personal relationships. His list of romances with models, actresses, and socialites was widely documented by the press. I won't abandon her, he said with conviction. I won't abandon either of you. Something shifted in Daniela's gaze at those last words, a mixture of surprise and caution. "Don't bring personal feelings into this, Adrian," she warned. "What we had ended 15 years ago. And yet, here we are," he replied, holding her gaze. "Fate has a strange sense of humor, don't you think?" Daniela sighed, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of the conversation. "This is about Valeria," she insisted. "Not about us." "There is no us, of course," Adrian conceded, though they both knew there was more than they were willing to admit at that moment. "So, what do you say? Will you give me a chance to get to know my daughter?" Daniela was silent for a long time, as if weighing all the possible consequences of her decision. Finally, she seemed to come to a resolution. "There's one condition," she said firmly. "Everything happens at my pace. No pressure, no rushing things. And if at any moment I feel that this is negatively affecting Valeria, it's over. No arguments." "That sounds fair," Adrian accepted. "And one more thing," she added. "No extravagant gifts or attempts to buy her affection. I don't want you to dazzle her with your money. I want you to get to know her for real, as a person." Adrian nodded, understanding Daniela's concern. It was a valid concern. He had seen firsthand how wealth could distort relationships, create false expectations, and attract people for the wrong reasons. "You have my word," he promised. A knock on the door interrupted the conversation. The door opened slightly, and Valeria peeked her head in, looking surprised to see Adrian. "Sorry, I didn't know you were busy," she apologized, looking curiously at the visitor. "Oh, it's you, Mr. Black, right? From the other night's event." "That's me." Adrian smiled, a lump forming in his throat at the unexpected presence of his daughter. "A pleasure to see you again, Valeria." "Did you need something, honey?" Daniela asked, her tone changing completely when she addressed her daughter. "I just wanted to let you know that the supplier from the Hudson Valley is here with the heirloom tomatoes you ordered," the young woman replied. "And Chef Martinez says he needs your opinion on the tasting menu for Friday's event." "Tell him I'll be there in a moment," Daniela responded. "Mr. Black was just leaving." Adrian took the hint and stood up, grabbing his jacket. "Actually," he said, inspired by a sudden idea, "I was talking to your mother about the possibility of investing in Roots. I'm so impressed with the concept that I'm interested in supporting a possible expansion." Valeria's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Expansion? Mom, are you serious? Are we going to open another Roots?" Daniela shot Adrian a warning look, but maintained her composure in front of her daughter. "We're in very preliminary talks," she clarified. "Nothing is decided." "But that would be amazing," Valeria insisted. "You've always said you wanted to bring our cuisine to other cities." Adrian watched the exchange, fascinated by every new detail he discovered about his daughter. The passion with which she spoke of the restaurant, the pride in her mother's work, the use of our cuisine that indicated how involved she was in the family business. "In fact," he interjected, seeing an opportunity, "I'd love to learn more about how the restaurant operates. Maybe I could come by tomorrow and get a full tour. If it's not a bother, of course." Daniela narrowed her eyes, catching his strategy. But before she could respond, Valeria jumped in. "I could show you around," she offered excitedly. "I know every corner of this place. Mom is always so busy with preparations for the evening service." Adrian looked at Daniela, leaving the decision in her hands. After a moment of hesitation, she gave a slight nod. "All right," she conceded. "Valeria can give you the tour tomorrow at 3, but only for an hour, understood? She has to study for her exams afterward." "Mom, my exams aren't until next week," Valeria protested. "And you're going to be perfectly prepared for them," Daniela replied, with that tone that didn't allow for argument, a tone familiar to any parent. Adrian watched the exchange with a mixture of admiration and envy. That bond between mother and daughter, built over years of living together, shared moments, established rules, and small battles, was something he had never experienced. But maybe, just maybe, he could start building something of his own with Valeria. 3 o'clock tomorrow, then, he confirmed, turning to his daughter with a smile that tried to hide the emotion he felt. I'm looking forward to seeing everything you've helped create here. As he said goodbye and left the office, he felt Daniela's gaze fixed on his back. A silent but clear message. Be careful. Don't hurt her. He had no intention of doing so. For the first time in his life, Adrian Black was willing to put someone else's needs before his own. And that realization both scared and thrilled him. At 3 minutes to 3, Adrian was already waiting outside Roots. For the first time in years, he was nervous. He had changed his outfit 3 times that morning, finally opting for something casual yet elegant. Dark chinos and an open-collar blue shirt. He didn't want to look like the intimidating businessman he was. He carried a folder of documents under his arm. It wasn't his real intention to invest in the restaurant, at least not initially, but he needed to maintain the facade he had created. Marcus had prepared a file for him, with pertinent questions and figures that any serious investor would consider. The restaurant door opened and Valeria appeared, dressed in jeans, a white blouse, sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, and without the makeup and formal dress from the gala, she looked even younger, more vulnerable, more obviously his daughter. Mr. Black, punctual, she greeted him with a smile that was, without a doubt, identical to his. Mom always says that punctuality is the courtesy of kings. And your mother is right, Adrian replied, fighting the urge to correct her, to ask her to call him by his first name. Mr. Black sounded so formal, so distant to his own father. And please, call me Adrian. Mr. Black makes me feel like my own father. Okay, Adrian, she conceded, the name sounding foreign on her lips. Ready for the grand tour of Roots? Completely ready, he nodded, following her inside. The restaurant was in full preparation for the evening service. Waiters were setting tables. Cooks were preparing the mise en place. The sommelier was checking bottles. It was an entire ecosystem working in perfect harmony. We'll start with the kitchen, which is the heart of everything, Valeria announced proudly, leading him to the back. The kitchen was an impressive space, modern and efficient, but with traditional touches. A rustic grill coexisted with state-of-the-art equipment. Young chefs worked in concentration, respectfully greeting Valeria as they passed. It was clear they respected her, not just as the chef's daughter, but in her own right. Do you cook too? Adrian asked, genuinely interested. Since I can remember, she replied naturally. Mom put a stool for me to reach the counter when I was 4 years old. I started by peeling potatoes and sorting beans, and I've been moving up from there. The image of a little Valeria helping Daniela in the kitchen caused a pang of nostalgia for moments he never lived. And do you like it? Do you want to follow in your mother's footsteps? The question seemed to touch something deep in Valeria. Her expression became more serious, more thoughtful. It's complicated, she admitted. I love to cook. I love this world. But sometimes I wonder if I love it because it's really my passion, or because it's all I've ever known. Adrian nodded, understanding the dilemma perfectly. He himself had initially followed his father's footsteps in construction before finding his own path in large-scale real estate development. What else would you like to do, if not this? He asked with genuine curiosity. Valeria looked at him out of the corner of her eye, as if evaluating whether she could trust him. Finally, as they passed into the wine cellar, she answered. I'm fascinated by architecture, she confessed. Designing spaces, thinking about how people will inhabit them, how they'll feel inside them. It's like cooking, in a way, but permanent. Adrian felt a wave of pride and surprise. Architecture? His daughter had inherited his passion for spaces, for building, without even knowing him. It's a fascinating profession, he commented, trying not to show too much enthusiasm. Coincidentally, I started my career in construction before moving into real estate development. Really? Valeria's eyes lit up. Mom never mentioned you were in that. Well, your mother and I met a long time ago, he replied carefully. I was just starting my career then. How exactly did you meet? Valeria asked, as they toured the cellar. Mom just said you were a customer at some place where she worked as a waitress. Adrian chose his words carefully, aware that he was treading on delicate ground. It was a small restaurant near the university, he explained. I had just graduated with an engineering degree and was starting my first project. I didn't have much money then, but I always found a way to have dinner there a couple of times a week. And did you like her? Valeria asked with a mischievous smile. The food? Adrian replied, feigning not to understand. No, silly Mom. Did you like Mom? The direct question caught him off guard. The casual way she called him silly also surprised him, as if there were already a familiarity between them. Your mother is an extraordinary woman, he replied sincerely. Intelligent, hard-working, with an integrity I've rarely seen in other people. And yes, I liked her very much. So what happened? Valeria insisted, as they climbed a ladder to the storage area. If you liked her so much? Adrian stopped, facing a simplified but crucial version of the truth. I made a bad decision, he admitted. I was offered a job in Spain, an opportunity that seemed too good to pass up. Your mother had her own dreams, her culinary studies. Neither of us wanted to give in, and we went our separate ways. Valeria nodded, processing the information. Do you regret it? She asked with the brutal honesty of youth. The question hung between them, loaded with meanings Valeria couldn't fully comprehend. Did he regret leaving Daniela? Did he regret not knowing his daughter for 15 years? The decisions that had defined his life? Every single day, he finally replied. But regret is a useless luxury if you don't learn from it. Something in his tone must have revealed more than he intended, because Valeria looked at him with renewed interest, as if seeing him for the first time. Mom never talks about her life before me, she commented as they continued the tour. I know it was hard for her. She had me very young and had to work while she studied, with the help of my grandma Lucia. It must have been very difficult, she agreed. Your mother is an extraordinarily strong woman. She is. Valeria nodded with pride. And she's never complained, not once, even though I know she gave up a lot for me. The conversation was interrupted when they entered a small rooftop garden. Aromatic plants, small fruit trees, and vegetables grew in neat rows. Wow, Adrian exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Is all of this part of the restaurant? From soil to table, Valeria recited with a smile. That's Mom's motto. We can't grow everything we use, of course, but we try with the herbs and some special vegetables. It's also therapeutic. Therapeutic? Yeah. Mom says the earth connects you to what's essential. It reminds you where you come from and what really matters, she explained, stroking the basil leaves with obvious affection. When I have a bad day at school, or I'm stressed about exams, I come up here and work with the plants for a while. It works better than any therapist. Adrian watched his daughter move among the plants with the same confidence and grace she used in the kitchen. She was a part of this place, this world that Daniela had created for them both, a world he wasn't a part of. Your mother has done an incredible job with you, he said, unable to hold back. You're an extraordinary young woman, Valeria. She looked at him, slightly surprised by the unexpected compliment. Thank you, she replied with a genuine smile. You're different from what I imagined millionaires would be like. Oh yeah? And what did you imagine we'd be like? I don't know. Arrogant? Obsessed with money? Constantly talking about yachts and expensive watches? She replied with a laugh. You seem normal, interested in real things. I'll take that as a compliment, Adrian smiled. As they headed back down to the restaurant, Valeria checked her watch. I have to get my things ready to study, she said. Mom is inflexible with study schedules. Of course, Adrian nodded, though he wished the visit would never end. It's been a fascinating tour. You've completely convinced me of Root's potential. As they reached the entrance, they stopped. Adrian knew he had to say goodbye, but he didn't want this first real contact with his daughter to end so soon. You know, he said, suddenly inspired, if you're interested in architecture, I could show you some of my projects sometime. I have a building under construction in Soho that incorporates some pretty innovative, sustainable elements. Valeria's eyes lit up with genuine interest. Really? You would? Of course, if your mother is okay with it, he added, aware of not overstepping the boundaries Daniela had set. I'll ask her, Valeria promised, though she can be pretty protective. I understand completely, Adrian assured her. She has every right to be. A voice from inside the restaurant called to Valeria. 1 second, Mom, she called back, before turning to Adrian. I have to go. It was a pleasure getting to know you better. Adrian, the pleasure was all mine, Valeria, he replied, resisting the urge to hug her. More than you know. As he watched her disappear into the restaurant, Adrian felt a mix of overwhelming emotions. Pride for the extraordinary young woman his daughter was. Gratitude toward Daniela for raising her so well. Sadness for all he had lost. And, surprisingly, hope. Hope that, just maybe, he could find a place in their lives. When he turned to leave, he noticed Daniela watching him from the restaurant window. Their eyes met briefly, and Adrian sent a silent message of gratitude. She responded with a slight nod before disappearing inside. It was a start, a small step on a road that promised to be long and complicated, but one that, for the first time in a long time, seemed truly worthwhile. What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think Adrian will get his second chance with Daniela? Let me know in the comments. Visit his construction site. Absolutely not. Daniela's voice echoed in her apartment kitchen, where she was preparing dinner while Valeria set the table. But Mom, it's an incredible opportunity, Valeria protested. Adrian has a sustainable building under construction, with solar panels, water collection systems, vertical gardens, stuff I've only seen in books. Daniela put down the knife she was using to chop vegetables and turned to her daughter. 2 weeks had passed since Adrian's visit to the restaurant. 2 weeks during which he had maintained a careful distance, limiting himself to sending a bouquet of flowers as a thank you for the tour and a formal note expressing his continued interest in Roots. All perfectly within the agreed-upon boundaries. Until now. You don't know him, Valeria, she said, choosing her words carefully. You don't know what kind of man he really is. He seems like a good person, Valeria replied, placing the glasses on the table. He's not like those smug rich guys who come to the restaurant. He shows genuine interest in what I say. He really listens to me. Of course he does, Daniela thought bitterly. He's getting to know his daughter. Besides, Valeria continued, I wouldn't go alone. You could come too. It would be educational for both of us. Daniela felt a pang of guilt. Her daughter didn't understand why she was so reluctant about a man who, in her eyes, just seemed kind and interested in her restaurant. She couldn't explain the real reasons without revealing the whole truth. I'll think about it, she finally conceded, returning to her culinary task. Really? Valeria's eyes lit up. I said I'd think about it, not that we're going, Daniela clarified, though she knew she was losing this battle. Her daughter's hopeful expression melted her resistance. Valeria's phone buzzed with a message notification. The young woman checked it and smiled. It's Adrian, she announced. He says if we agree to visit the site, we could go this Saturday. There will be an architect there to explain the whole project. Daniela let out an exasperated sigh. That very morning, she had received a message from Adrian asking if he could invite Valeria on the visit, promising it would be strictly professional and educational. She hadn't responded yet, and he was already coordinating with her daughter. Give me that phone, she demanded. holding out her hand. Valeria handed it to her, surprised by her tone. Daniela dialed Adrian's number and waited, walking into the living room for privacy. "Hello, Valeria." Adrian's voice sounded pleased on the other end. "It's her mother," Daniela interrupted. "What do you think you're doing? We agreed everything would be at my pace, and now you're making plans with my daughter behind my back." "That wasn't my intention," he replied, his tone turning serious. "I sent you a message this morning, asking if it would be okay, and I haven't replied yet." "I know, I'm sorry," Adrian conceded. "But when Valeria wrote to me asking about my projects, I just mentioned the possibility. I didn't confirm anything." Daniela took a deep breath, trying to control her frustration. "This is exactly what I was worried about," she said in a low voice. "That you would start making unilateral decisions, creating expectations for her. That wasn't my intention." Adrian's voice sounded genuinely remorseful. "I promise it won't happen again. If you don't want her to go to the site, I'll understand." The sincerity in his tone softened Daniela slightly. Over the past 2 weeks, Adrian had shown more patience and consideration than she expected. "It's not that," she finally admitted. "It's just, Valeria is getting her hopes up about you. She talks about you constantly, comments on your messages. She's fascinated by your world, and I'm worried that when she finds out the truth, I'm her father," Adrian completed in a low voice. "Yes," Daniela confirmed. "I'm afraid of her reaction, that she'll feel betrayed by both of us." A thoughtful silence fell between them. "Do you think it's time to tell her?" Adrian finally asked. The question hung in the air. Was it? Daniela had observed the growing connection between father and daughter, even in those few interactions. Valeria spoke of Adrian with admiration, interested in his work, his opinions, his life. It was as if, on a subconscious level, she felt the bond that united them. "I don't know," she replied sincerely. "Part of me wants to keep protecting her, to keep everything as it is. But another part knows that the more they get to know each other without her knowing the truth, the harder it will be later." "What if the 3 of us go to the site this Saturday?" Adrian proposed. "It will be a neutral, educational environment, as I promised. And afterward, if you feel it's right, we could have lunch together and tell her." Daniela's heart skipped a beat. It was a huge step, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. Revealing the truth would forever change the dynamic between her and Valeria. Their small universe of 2 would be irrevocably transformed. "I need to think about it," she finally said. "I'll call you tomorrow with my decision." "Of course," Adrian replied, and added before hanging up, "Thank you, Daniela, for even considering it." When she returned to the kitchen, Valeria was watching her with a worried expression. "Are you mad because I talked to him?" she asked directly. Daniela placed the phone on the counter and walked over to her daughter, taking her hands in hers. "No, honey, I'm not mad," she assured her. "Just cautious. Adults sometimes have complicated reasons for our worries." "Does it have something to do with you having a crush on him before?" Valeria asked, surprising her with her perceptiveness. "What makes you think I had a crush on him?" Daniela replied, evasive. "Because of the way you look at him, and the way he talks about you. Like you're something very valuable he lost by mistake," Valeria explained with a simplicity that hid a surprising emotional depth. "Also, you've never talked to me about my father, and Adrian is about the age he would be. And sometimes, when you think I'm not looking, you watch both of us with a strange expression like scared." Daniela felt the ground shift under her feet. Her daughter, her brilliant and perceptive daughter, was putting the pieces together on her own. How much had she already guessed? "Valeria," she began, not knowing how to continue. "It's okay if you don't want to talk about it," the young woman said, squeezing her mother's hands. "I just want you to know that I'm not a child anymore. I can handle difficult truths." Daniela's eyes filled with tears. When had her little girl grown up so much? When had she become so wise, so understanding? We'll go on the visit this Saturday, she decided suddenly. The three of us. And afterward, we'll talk. Valeria's smile lit up the room. Thank you, Mom. I promise I'll be good, and won't ask him for anything extravagant or— I know, honey, Daniela interrupted with a smile. I trust you. I always have. The Saturday dawned clear and fresh, perfect for a visit to an outdoor construction site. Adrian waited in front of the building under construction, dressed in jeans, a short-sleeved shirt, and a white hard hat. He held 2 more hard hats in his hands. When he saw the taxi arrive with Daniela and Valeria, he felt a knot in his stomach. They had agreed on the phone that today would be the day. After the visit, during lunch, they would tell Valeria the truth. Her life would change forever in a matter of hours. Good morning, Valeria greeted him, getting out of the car enthusiastically. This is huge. The building under construction rose 20 stories above the exclusive Soho neighborhood. The special glass panels, already installed on the lower floors, shimmered with greenish hues under the morning sun. Good morning, Adrian replied, handing her a hard hat. Safety first. Valeria put it on immediately, adjusting it with enthusiasm. Then she turned to Daniela, who was approaching with a more reserved expression. You look good in a hard hat, Mom, she joked, as Adrian handed one to Daniela. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, and they both felt a familiar spark. 15 years had passed, but some connections seemed immune to time. The architect is waiting for us upstairs, Adrian announced, breaking the moment. Damien Wells, one of the best in sustainable architecture in the country. As they went up in this construction elevator, Adrian watched the mother and daughter. Valeria practically vibrated with excitement, pointing out technical details she surprisingly knew. Daniela, for her part, maintained a tense calm, like someone preparing for a decisive moment. The tour of the site was a revelation. Valeria absorbed every explanation from the architect, with a comprehension that went far beyond what was expected for her age. She asked insightful questions about the energy systems, the building's orientation, and the materials used. Adrian watched her with growing pride, recognizing in her his own passion for construction, for creating spaces. It's impressive how you've integrated the vertical gardens with the water collection system, Valeria commented, as they toured the 18th floor, still in its raw state. Was it difficult to convince investors that the additional cost was worth it? Damien looked at Adrian with a surprised smile before answering. Normally, yes. Investors tend to worry more about immediate profitability than long-term sustainability, he explained. But in this case, Adrian was the one who insisted on incorporating all these elements, even when they increased the budget. Really? Valeria looked at Adrian with renewed admiration. I think we have a responsibility to future generations, he replied, aware that he was speaking literally to his own future generation. What we build today will define the world they live in tomorrow. Valeria nodded, absorbing his words, while Daniela watched the exchange with an unreadable expression. Was she finally seeing the man Adrian had become, so different from the ambitious young man she had left behind? When the tour ended and Damien said his goodbyes, the three were left alone on the ground floor of the building. The moment of truth was approaching, and Adrian could feel the tension in the air. Would you like to have lunch now? He asked, his voice slightly deeper than normal. I know a quiet place nearby. Daniela nodded, exchanging a meaningful look with him. Valeria, oblivious to the weight of the moment, smiled enthusiastically. I'm starving. Learning about sustainable architecture works up an appetite. As they walked to the restaurant, Adrian felt an irresistible impulse. He reached out and took Valeria's hand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She looked at him for a moment, surprised, but didn't pull her hand away. On the contrary, she squeezed it slightly. Adrian looked up and met Daniela's eyes, which were shining with unshed tears. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, as if giving him permission, acknowledging the bond that already existed between father and daughter, even before the words made it official. It was time for the truth to come out. The restaurant was small and cozy, with well-spaced tables that allowed for private conversations. Adrian had reserved a quiet corner by the window, with a view of a small indoor garden. The three of them sat down, Valeria across from Adrian and Daniela, who exchanged nervous glances while the young woman enthusiastically perused the menu. "This looks delicious," Valeria commented, oblivious to the tension in the air. "Though I'm sure it's not as good as your cooking, Mom." Daniela gave a weak smile, her mind clearly somewhere else. After they ordered, an awkward silence settled over the table. Valeria looked at them both, frowning slightly. "Is everything okay?" she finally asked. "You both suddenly seem different." Adrian took a deep breath and looked at Daniela, who gave a slight nod. "Valeria," he began, his voice deeper than normal. "Your mother and I need to tell you something important." The young woman looked at them alternately, understanding gradually illuminating her eyes. "Are you dating?" she asked directly. "Is that it? Because if you are, it's okay. In fact, I think it would be great." The unexpected question made Daniela almost choke on her water. Adrian couldn't help a small smile. "No, we're not dating," Daniela clarified, regaining her composure. "It's something more complicated than that." Valeria watched them intently, waiting. Intuition shone in her eyes, as if she was already putting the pieces together herself. "Valeria," Adrian said, deciding the moment had come, "what we want to tell you is that I'm your father." The words hung between them like fragile crystals. Valeria remained completely still, her expression frozen in a mixture of surprise and something more difficult to define. Seconds that felt like an eternity passed until she finally spoke. "I suspected it," she said in a low voice, surprising them both. "Not consciously, perhaps, but there was something familiar about you from the very beginning. The same interest in architecture, the same smile, according to Grandma Lucia. The way we just got each other so quickly." Her words trailed off as she processed the magnitude of the revelation. Then, a spark of confusion, followed by pain, crossed her face. "But if you're my father, why weren't you ever there? Why are you showing up now, after 15 years? The question, direct and painful, was exactly what they both expected. Adrian felt his mouth go dry, but he knew he owed his daughter the truth. "I didn't know you existed," he replied sincerely. "Your mother and I separated before she knew she was pregnant. I tried to contact him," Daniela intervened, determined to share the responsibility. "But circumstances, it didn't work out, and I made the decision to move forward alone." "And you never thought to try again?" Valeria asked her mother, a note of reproach in her voice. "In the 15 years that followed?" Daniela looked down, guilt evident on her face. "At first it was pride," she admitted. "Then, fear of complicating the life we had built. And over time, it became harder to imagine how to do it." Valeria turned back to Adrian. "And you? Did you never wonder about Mom afterward? Did you never try to find her?" Adrian felt the weight of the question like a slab on his shoulders. "I did," he replied, surprising even Daniela. "A year after I left for Spain, when my first project was a success, I came back to New York. I went to the restaurant where your mother worked, but she wasn't there anymore. No one could tell me where to find her." "You never told me that," Daniela interrupted, shocked. "Would it have changed anything if you had known?" he asked softly. Daniela was silent, with no answer to that question. "I tried to find you a couple more times over the years," Adrian continued, addressing Daniela. "But by then, you had changed your professional name. You were no longer Daniela Morales, the waitress, but Chef Sanchez. And well, life went on. I built my company. I focused on work. Until you saw us at the gala, Valeria finished, finally connecting all the pieces. Until I saw you, Adrian corrected with contained emotion. And I recognized my own smile on your face. A silence heavy with emotion fell between them. The waiter arrived with their plates, but none of them made a move to touch their food. So what now? Valeria finally asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. What does this mean for us? Adrian exchanged a look with Daniela before answering. It means whatever you want it to mean, he said sincerely. I have no right to break into your life and pretend to be the father I wasn't for 15 years. But if you give me the chance, I would like to try to build a relationship with you, to get to know you for real, to be a part of your life to the extent that you allow it. Valeria looked down at her plate, processing his words. When she looked up, there were unshed tears in her eyes. I always wondered what it would be like to have a father, she confessed in a low voice. At school, when other kids talked about their dads, I would make up stories. Sometimes, you were an astronaut on a secret mission. Other times, a lost explorer in the jungle. A solitary tear rolled down Daniela's cheek. Adrian felt a lump in his throat. The reality is less romantic, he said with a sad smile. I'm just a man who made the mistake of letting go of the best thing that ever happened to him. And now I discover that that mistake was even bigger than I ever imagined. His words, directed as much to Valeria as to Daniela, floated in the air, charged with meaning. Daniela looked at him with an expression that mixed surprise with something deeper, something that recalled the feelings they once shared. I want to try, Valeria finally decided, straightening up in her chair. I want to get to know you, to be your daughter. But, Adrian asked, holding his breath. But I need time, she completed, to process everything, to understand who you really are and who I am now that I know this. All the time you need, Adrian assured her, the relief evident in his voice. We'll go at your pace. An invisible weight seemed to lift from the table. The three of them began to eat, the conversation gradually flowing toward lighter topics. Valeria asked about Adrian's family, his grandparents, if they had more relatives. He responded with stories about his childhood, about how he had fallen in love with architecture while watching his father build things. By the time they finished dessert, something had changed between them. A faint but undeniable sense of family was beginning to form. I have to go to Grandma Lucia's to get some books, Valeria announced as they left the restaurant. Do you mind if I leave you two alone for a while? I think you also have things to talk about. Her daughter's transparent strategy made Daniela smile. As subtle as ever, she commented when Valeria drove off in a taxi. I wonder where she gets that determination, Adrian replied with a smile, before turning serious. Daniela, let's take a walk, she suggested, pointing to a nearby park. They walked in silence for a few minutes, side by side, each lost in their own thoughts. You handled that well, Daniela finally said. With Valeria, she made it easy, he replied. She's extraordinary. You've done an incredible job raising her. Thank you, she accepted, and then added, was it true? Did you really look for me? Adrian nodded, stopping next to a small fountain. I never stopped wondering what had become of you, he confessed. Of us, if I had made different decisions. Daniela looked at him, 15 years of unresolved emotions reflected in her eyes. And now? She asked, echoing Valeria's question. What does this mean for us? Adrian gently took her hand, a tentative gesture, but full of hope. It means a second chance, if you're willing to give it to us, he replied. Not just for Valeria, although she would be reason enough, but because this week I rediscovered something I think I never truly forgot. That you, Daniela Sanchez, are still the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. An involuntary smile appeared on Daniela's lips. "You're still good with words," she commented, but she didn't pull her hand away. "And you're still impossible to impress with just words," he replied. "That's why I always liked you." They looked at each other, and, for a moment, time seemed to reverse. They were once again that ambitious young man and that determined waitress. Before life separated them, "We could try," Daniela finally conceded. "Slowly, for Valeria's sake." Of course, for Valeria. Adrian nodded, though they both knew there was more. "And maybe," she added, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, "maybe also for us." Adrian smiled, intertwining his fingers with hers more firmly. "I think that's an excellent plan, Chef Sanchez." Final call to action. What's the biggest lesson you took from this story? Share your thoughts below. A year later, the restaurant Roots was celebrating its second anniversary with a private party. The terrace had been transformed into a garden of lights and flowers, where Daniela's team and special guests were enjoying a perfect night. In one corner, Valeria, now a newly turned 16, was proudly showing her grandma Lucia the plans for a house she had designed for a school project. Beside her, Adrian pointed out technical details, his paternal pride evident in every gesture. "An architect in the making," Daniela commented, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "Just like her father." "With her mother's culinary talent," Adrian added, accepting one of the glasses. "She's the best of both of us." Lucia, watching the scene with wise eyes, discreetly excused herself to go talk to other guests, leaving them alone. "Who would have thought a year ago that we'd be here?" Daniela reflected, watching her daughter interact confidently with the guests. "Do you regret it?" Adrian asked, putting an arm around her waist. "Not for a second," she replied, leaning slightly against him. "Though I'm still surprised by how quickly Valeria accepted you into her life." "That's because I was always her favorite father," he joked. "You were her only father," Daniela reminded him, gently hitting his shoulder. "Details, details," he smiled, leaning in for a quick kiss. From the other side of the terrace, Valeria watched them with a satisfied smile. Seeing her parents together, happy, was like a piece of her life that she didn't even know was missing had finally fallen into place. The road hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, moments of doubt, adjustments to the family dynamic. But every challenge had been worth it to reach this moment. "Attention, everyone," Adrian called, raising his glass. "I'd like to make a toast." The guests turned to him, expectant. "To Roots," he began. "To the extraordinary talent of its creator. To the family we have built. And to second encounters, which sometimes turn out to be better than the first ones." He looked at Daniela with so much love that a blush rose to her cheeks. "And above all," he added, now addressing Valeria, "to our daughter, whose identical smile gave me back what I never knew I had lost." The glasses were raised, the crystals clinked, and 3 hearts that had once been separated beat in unison under the starry New York sky. Sometimes, life offers second chances. And sometimes, all it takes is one inherited smile to change the course of 3 destinies forever.